Hi, my name is Liz Nugent, and I'm going to do some short readings for you from my most recent novel, Our Little Cruelties, and from my second novel, Lying in Wait. What's a runt, Dad? Where did you hear that word, Luke? He said. Mum said I was the runt of the litter, and litter means rubbish. What did she mean? Did she say it when she was cross with you? She's always cross with me. No, she isn't. She's just a bit tired these days. She said she was going to leave me with the old woman who lives in the woods. Our Little Cruelties is about three brothers who grow up in the same family, with the same parents and the same education, and yet they are treated very differently by their parents, particularly by their mother. And it is how she treats them that really forms their life choices later on and really influences how they behave as adults. So in the opening chapter, you know that one of them is dead and that one of them has murdered him. Dad lifted me onto his shoulders and we continued our stroll down the pier. I don't know where Brian and William were that day. I didn't spend too much time alone with my dad. But when I did, I really loved it. Dad always made me feel special. So the rest of the book raises the tension between the betrayals between the three brothers, so that by the time you get to the end of the book, you know that each brother has a very good reason to kill either of the other two. And so I build tension all the way through the book, from childhood, like little tiny things that happen when they're kids, and I build on those until the betrayals become bigger and bigger, so that by the end you have to guess which one is going to kill which one. And that's the basic question at the beginning of the book. First of all, who's dead? Who killed him? And why did they kill him? At night time, I'd look out of my bedroom window at the woods behind our house and wonder about the old woman who lived there, even though Dad said she didn't. I'd been through the woods in daytime when we went looking for conkers, but I never saw a house there, and the only old lady I ever saw was Mrs. Turner next door, walking her dog. I wanted Dad to be right. I was terrified of being sent to live in the woods. Well, I don't name the street that the three boys grow up in Our Little Cruelties, but notionally it was Silchester Road. They would probably have gone to school in either Blackrock College or CBC Monkstown. They're on the, just scraping together the school fees edge of financial security. They're not wealthy, but because of where they live and where they go to school, they have the appearance of wealth. Lying in Wait is another book that is set in South County Dublin. In particular, the house, which is almost a central character in the book, Avalon. Avalon is coincidentally the name of the house I grew up in, but it is not the house that I use in the book. The house that I use in the book is a house that a friend of mine lived in when we were children, and I would go and visit her in that house. And it was on Residence Road in Cabinteely. Of course, now the house no longer exists because the family sold the house many, many years ago, and the new owners, when the Celtic Tiger arrived, they sold the house, and now there's a block of apartments on it. So the house no longer exists. And I think that will be true of a lot of those grand houses that are on Residence Road. It was crucial in the story that this was a big house, isolated, that it would have a big, large garden on an acre, so that no neighbours would overhear screaming matches or somebody burying a body in the pond. Spoiler alert. so that, things could go on behind those high walls that were unobserved by neighbours. So even though they live in a bustling suburb of South County Dublin, they could live a very private and very isolated life. One day, when I was about 25, Daddy had telephoned me at home and told me that we were having a special guest for dinner and that I should cook something nice and get my hair done. I was curious about this visitor and why I should dress up for him. I should have guessed, of course, that Daddy was intent on matchmaking. He needn't have worried. Andrew adored me right away. Our courtship was short and very sweet. Andrew came from a good family. His late father had been a consultant paediatrician, and though I found his mother a little contrary, she raised no objections to our relationship. After all, when Andrew married me, he would get Avalon too, a 5-bedroom detached Georgian house on an acre of land in Cabinteely, South County Dublin. Andrew wanted us to get a house of our own when we got married, but Daddy put his foot down. "You'll move in here. This is Lydia's home. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth." So Andrew moved in with us, and Daddy gave up the master bedroom and moved to the large bedroom on the other side of the hallway. Andrew grumbled a little to me. "But darling, don't you see how awkward it is? I'm living with my boss." I guess privileged South Dublin is an area that I know quite well, because I was one of those kids who went to a private school in South Dublin, and I spent a lot of time in these big houses. But I also observed that people who lived in big houses didn't necessarily behave in perfect ways. Andrew worked his way up through the ranks until finally all his time on the golf course paid off. And 3 years ago, he was appointed as a judge in the criminal courts. He was a respected member of society. People listened to him when he spoke and quoted him in the newspapers. But last year, Paddy Carey, his old pal, accountant and golfing partner, had left the country with our money. Andrew suggested selling some land to developers to raise capital. I was horrified at the suggestion. Nobody of our status would do such a thing. I had spent my whole life in Avalon. My father had inherited it from his father, and it was the house in which I was born. I was not going to compromise on selling any part of Avalon. I draw character studies for all of my characters before I begin, particularly the main characters, the main protagonists. So I know where they live, I know what newspaper they read, I know how they vote, I know whether they like tea or coffee, I know whether they drink beer or wine. I would really kind of do my homework on those characters, and I suppose where they live is important because it informs their background, and it informs, in most cases in my books, their sense of privilege and entitlement. Most of my characters are middle-class monsters because it's much easier to hide being a monster if you are middle-class. Libraries have been hugely important to me since I was a very small girl. My parents separated when I was 6 or 7 years old. So when I got time with my dad, who died just 2 weeks ago, when I got time with him, he would take me to the library. Then we would go back to wherever he was living, flat or a house, like he moved around quite a lot. We would swap books. So I would read, a Roald Dahl, and he would read a biography of Barbra Streisand. And then we would swap books. And then we would talk about books. So he really stimulated my interest in books through libraries. Later, I became a library user, not so much in that I borrow books from libraries, but that I would use libraries in which to write. I would write in Blackrock Library or Deansgrange Library. I came here sometimes, but I found this one a bit too vast for me. There's too much space for my ideas, and I needed them to be more condensed.